you. Can everyone hear me? I trust that everyone can hear me. I'm deeply humbled that so many people actually want to hear me speak this evening. Thank you, Chris, for that introduction. Many of you know me from various different places, and it's just a humbling experience to know that you're out there. And I'm here in Cape Town. We're under lockdown, and I've been sort of housebound for the last 4 weeks. And I love the concept of being able to unlock nature with everybody. And I'm going to give you a little bit of a background of myself and how I got to where I am today. And where I am today is being involved in one of the coolest conservation projects on the planet. And it takes place in northern Congo. And I just hope that when this is all over, that you guys will actually come out and be able to join us out in Odzala and northern Congo and Central African Republic. So let me begin by saying that I went to high school in Northern California and more or less grew up there. And that's where I really fell in love with nature. And it was, fishing in the rivers, the various forks of the Feather River outside of Oroville, and then ended up at the University of California, Davis doing my undergraduate back in the 80s. And I actually took a job at a primate research facility in Northern California, the California National Primate Research Center. And it was at this research center where a virus was discovered in macaques. And this virus is very similar to the HIV virus. It was starting to be the scourge of the world. And it turns out, and I've got my pointer here, that this is an aerial view of the primate center, and I'm circling the cage where these SIV, simian immune deficiency virus macaques, were kept. And it was interesting because these animals actually showed a very similar disease to humans. And it led the researchers there to start asking questions about how did these primates get it, where's the virus coming from? And it turns out through their sleuth work that they were able to determine that the mangabes, that pseudomangabes, an African primate, actually was the natural host of the virus that contaminated the rhesus macaques. And so back in the 80s, the head of virology at the primate center went to Liberia to visit some people and find out where these pseudomangabes lived. Well, he found out that they lived in rainforests of West Africa, Sierra Leone, Liberia, Ivory Coast. And so he went out there to see, just to find out, sort of a ground truthing experiment. And on his way to visit his colleagues in just outside of Monrovia, he saw a woman with a pet monkey, and he took a blood sample from that pet monkey. And what was interesting is when we got back, he found out that that pet monkey actually had a virus very similar to what was very similar to the macaque virus, but very similar to HIV too. So he got a grant, and he ended up sending me to Sierra Leone back in 1991 to try and find the origins of the human AIDS epidemic, or at least be part of the team that was looking for the origins. So we ended up in Sierra Leone in a CDC project called the Lassa Fever Project, which is interesting because it's a hemorrhagic fever very similar to Ebola. And this is just a picture of myself in Kenema. There's a very young me from many years ago, and there's a very young Trish, my wife, those of you who know her. And we went to Sierra Leone to look for these primates in the wild, to see if they actually had viruses in the wild, to see if these viruses were being transmitted to humans, and if so, how. Basically to try and understand the depth of the AIDS epidemic and a lot of the issues that we know today, we didn't know back then. So it was an amazing time, and I was very excited to go to Sierra Leone. Everything that I had read about the country really fascinated me. It was, the pre-colonial literature, the pre-independence literature that I read about was that the country's covered in rainforest, and it's 75% rainforest, and there's monkeys everywhere, and it was amazing. So I got there, and my job was basically to find monkeys that were in captivity, take blood samples. Part of the Lassa Fever Project was interesting because they were doing serosurveys. So we were looking to see if any of these primate viruses might have been in humans, and crisscrossing the country there. It was a bit disappointing for me because when I got to Sierra Leone, I realized that this rainforest that was supposed to be there had been devastated. there was only about 5% of it left, and all the rest had been turned into farm bush through slash and burn agriculture. Most of the primates had been hunted to extinction. It was a full year before I saw my first primate. But we crisscrossed the country. We lived there for 4 years. The Civil War in Sierra Leone broke out while we were there, and we ended up having to move the project. And we were very lucky because we were invited to Gabon. And so in 1994, we picked up and we moved to Gabon, which was a French-speaking country. I didn't speak a word of French, so it was a very eye-opening experience. But what's really cool about Gabon, as you can see from this map, and this is the Congo Basin rainforest cover, that Gabon actually is also extremely forested. And what was really cool about Gabon is in its rainforest was still intact. And so for me, I was just really blown away, and it was a great pleasure to be able to see this country that is covered in rainforest. And so I continued the work. We were taking samples from pet monkeys. We were developing new techniques to non-invasively sample. So it was allowing me to go into the field and actually collect fecal samples from wild primates. And that would allow me to help find what viruses were in the wild without actually having to handle the primates. And what was really cool about that is it introduced me to a lot of conservation biologists and a lot of people that I was working with. And so while we were there, you know, these are the sooty mangabes, and we found those in Sierra Leone, and those are linked to the macaques and to the HIV-2 epidemic. But we also were working at a research facility where they had the mandrill virus. We discovered the red cap mangabe virus, and that's all linked to the HIV-1 epidemic. So it was a really exciting time. We were looking for the viruses in the wild. We were finding the viruses in the wild, really having a great time developing the science and the understanding of HIV epidemic that was taking place in humans. But what was cool was I was also able to live, to work a lot in the rainforest of Gabon. And when I was collecting feces from wild primates in the Lope Reserve in central Gabon, I met a young researcher there who on a Sunday afternoon said to me, he says he thought he had a new species of plant to science, and he wanted to know if I wanted to join him to find the species, to find a sample of this. So this is a mountain in Lope. It's called the camel because it resembles a camel's hump. And the new species was somewhere up here in one of his transects. So we hiked up there and we collected the species, this new plant specimen. It was very cool. And just as we were ready to leave, we heard this loud noise, this vocalization of something I'd never heard before. And this young researcher says to me, he says, well, Paul, that might be gorillas. Can't know for sure, but let's go see if we can find out. But if it is gorillas, you've got to be really careful, because if we somehow threaten them, you know, the male, who's quite strong and powerful, could you know, be very protective. And so if we run into them, here's how you have to behave. You know, don't look them in the eye, get really low, crouch down, and maybe tear up some leaves in front of your mouth just so you look like some sort of non-threatening herbivore. So we slowly proceeded down this hillside looking for these gorillas. We were making about 25 meters every 10 minutes or so. And suddenly about 20 minutes into the attempt to find these animals, suddenly right in the middle of the rainforest, this massive silverback male just appears right in front of us, comes charging up the hill. And just when he got about 15 feet away from us, he stopped, sat down, and basically looked at us. And so, you know, we stopped and dropped and started tearing up leaves in front of our mouths and trying to be as non-threatening as possible. And he turned around and then just sat down right there. And out of the rainforest appeared the rest of his family. And we spent 2 hours with this group of gorillas that had never seen humans before. And it just blew my mind. And this is actually a picture of me that day taken by my friend, looking at these gorillas. And these are the first time I ever saw gorillas, and it changed my life. So after the gorillas had had enough of us, they just sort of faded away back into the forest. And I said to this young researcher, I said, I want to do what you're doing. I want to do it for the rest of my life. I want to help protect this rainforest, and I want to start doing primate research, and I want to work in conservation. He says, well, I work for the Wildlife Conservation Society. And I said, well, I'd like to work for the Wildlife Conservation Society. And he sort of laughed and he said, you know, the Wildlife Conservation Society only hires people with PhDs. I said, oh, well, I want to go get a PhD. And he sort of laughed as we were walking down the hill, but I was very persistent, and I bugged him for 5 days, and he and his wife helped coach me and introduce me to some people and put me on a path so that 18 months later, I was actually enrolled in a PhD program at the New York University. And I was very fortunate to be part of the NICEP consortium. And I did my coursework over the course of the next 3 years and then went back to Gabon in 1999 to do my field work. And that field work was actually part of my, ended up doing field work, collecting samples from mandrills and looking at the molecular phylogeny and the distribution of mandrills. And what I found was that mandrills north of the Ogooué River and mandrills south of the Ogooué River were genetically distinct to the point where someday we could actually probably name a new subspecies. Now, while I was doing that field work, this young researcher who was working for WCS was pairing up with his friend, a guy named Mike Fay, and they went on a National Geographic sponsored trip called the Mega Transect. Now, my friend Lee didn't actually go on the walk, but he helped organize the logistics, especially through Gabon. But this is a fairly famous trip where they started in northern Congo and walked through the rainforest, recording everything, right through Odzala National Park, and then all the way through northeastern Gabon, and then out westward, all the way to the coast of Gabon. And what was really special, it took them 18 months. It was an incredible journey. It was well documented. There's some great books. There's some National Geographic articles, excuse me. And there were some incredible images that came out of it. But what was most incredible is at the end of this trip, and some of the videos that came out prompted Lee and Mike to work together with the government and the President Omar Bongo of Gabon. They created 13 national parks in the country. So with the stroke of a pen in August of 2002, 13 national parks were created where there had been none. So it was really amazing. Lee White went on to create the WCS Gabon program. And this is a very young Lee White with his lovely wife, Kate. There's a very young me many years ago. In fact, this picture was taken in 1999. I believe it was December 31st. And that was the eve of the Y2K bug. So it was another type of pandemic that was going around scaring everybody. A little different than the one we're going through today. But this is a picture of the same Lee White taken last year, and this old man is myself. Lee has been there still working in Gabon. He's now the Minister of Environment, Forests, Oceans, and Climate Change Planning. So true to his word, he actually hired me when I got my PhD. And I was very lucky to start working in northeastern Gabon around the Vindo National Park. And I was participating in a study called the Parks and People Study. And so the purpose of this project was to actually try and find out if the creation or if national parks had a beneficial or negative effect on the populations that lived in around them. So we chose a select number of villages in the proximity of the park, and we were taking baseline data from the people who live there to find out their socioeconomic status, their health status, and all these different things to try and find out if a park actually had a positive effect on the communities, with the hopes that a park would ultimately over years have a positive effect. So we sampled outside of the park in areas that were also remote, but we sampled villages inside a park or very near a park, within 20 kilometers of a park, to see if a national park would ultimately have a positive effect. And that meant going into the village, taking surveys of the village, working with them to map their land use plans. This is my team, my first conservation team that I worked with in Uvindo. And we'd even, to look at the status of the people, this is baseline data we were collecting. We were even looking at their health and well-being by measuring their body mass index, their height, and all these things. And so here's just a picture of one of the subjects. And that baseline data we collected for several years. And now we need to go back and actually redo that data to see whether or not these parks will have had a positive or negative influence. But I did that for 2 years. And after that, I was called to become the director of a binational landscape. So this is a project that was in the southeast of Gabon and southern Congo. And what was really cool about this project is it was a national park in the Gabon side, but the Congolese government had indicated that they were willing and interested in creating a national park around that park on the Congolese side. So between the two governments, there was going to be a very large binational protected area. And my job was to help shepherd the government forward and to help with biological monitoring. And I was able to use many of the skills that I'd learned in the Avindo project there. So working with the communities to make sure that the communities were not going to be negatively impacted, to actually make sure that the communities informed the government about what they thought was going to be important to them, and to make sure that their livelihoods would be continuing to be protected and hopefully improved. So community mapping, finding out from the communities, in fact, where the boundaries of the park should be and what behaviors they would like to see themselves allowed to do and not allowed to do. And what was really interesting about that project, again, was the government really wanted to do it. They wanted to do it right. And they asked WCS, the Wildlife Conservation Society, to be a technical partner with them. So I was doing that project. And then I was very fortunate and privileged to have been called by WCS to head the WCS Congo program. So I moved in 2008 from southeastern Gabon into the Republic of Congo, into Brazzaville, where I became the country program director for WCS Congo. And what was really cool about this project is that we were there to help the government implement their vision of sustainable land use. And that meant being technical partners in protected areas, so helping them manage national parks, but also working with them to create new protected areas, the one around the Bateke Plateau in Gabon, another protected area up in the north of the country called the Ntuku-Pikunda. We worked with them to help create a national park, but we also worked with private industry, the logging companies, in what we called buffer zone projects, just to make sure that the logging companies respected not only socioeconomic rights, but ecological, the well-being of the animals. So this helping the governments manage, helping the government help the logging companies manage eco guards and to protect the wildlife in the parks. And you can see WCS was quite, it was a very big project. The Congolese government was very interested in making things work. So there was National Park Nubali Ndoki. We were helping them in the Lac-Tele Community Reserve. We were not active in Odzala, but at the time it was an EcoFact funded project. We helped create the Ntuku-Pikunda National Park in this area that I'm circling with the pen. And then this is the Bateke Plateau Park that we were helping them work with, and also Konkwati, which is a park that has a marine component. So all in all, it was an incredible 6 years that I got to spend helping the government. And we had 300 employees. We had 6 major projects, including a landscape level project. And we were raising and spending a lot of money helping the government in Congo. But what's interesting is the government of Congo, although they were appreciative for the work we were doing, they were always a little bit sensitive, saying, you know, we've got these national parks, but what good is having these national parks to us? What are we getting out of it? And, you know, they kept saying things like, you know, we could turn this national park into a logging concession and sell it to the Chinese, and then we'd get money. You know, you guys, you NGOs are very good at protecting and monitoring, but what are we getting out of it? And that's when, oh, well, this is just a picture of us, of myself and Minister Henry Jumbo, who was the minister at the time. And this was the penultimate meeting that we had before the president actually signed the decree to create the Ntuku-Pikunda National Park in Congo while I was there. It was a huge pleasure to be working with them and creating a national park, but at the same time understanding that the government was not really satisfied with the way conservation was going in the country. And of course, that's when I actually got to meet this interesting character named Chris Murray, who is the CEO of an NGO called the Leadership for Conservation in Africa. And what's interesting about this NGO is that they positively influence, they accelerate, they bring about change by bringing partners together and helping bring new concepts to conservation, in particular in the Congo Basin. And so the LCA started to work with the Congolese government to put together public-private partnerships to promote economic growth and investment in the national parks. And this is something that has been very successful in other parts of Africa, but it was a brand new concept in the Republic of Congo and in Central Africa. And so while the LCA was trying to convince the government of Congo to create a delegated management responsibility in Odzala National Park, they were talking to various partners from African parks. And one of the board members of the LCA, Mrs. Sabina Plattner, she said that if the government will protect the park, then she would invest and help create this public-private partnership. So while I was helping the LCA in their efforts in Odzala, the LCA ended up helping me while I was at WCS, and they created a public-private partnership, which ultimately created the Nubali and Doki Foundation. And so the LCA did this amazing work. I was very happy to participate in it. And that's what ultimately led me into leaving WCS and joining what I think is one of the most magnificent and cool projects in the entire planet. And that is the Congo Conservation Company actually implementing this idea of conservation commerce in Odzala National Park in northwestern Congo. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of so that's what I'm doing today. That's the conservation that we're doing today. And I want to tell you a little bit about what's exciting about the Congo Conservation Company and the Odzala Discovery Camp. So this is an opportunity for me to share the nature and the unlocking of nature. And hopefully when all of this pandemic is over with, you'll be able to come out and actually visit it firsthand. So I would encourage you all to do so. But one of the things we do is we fly you up into northern Congo from Brazzaville, where a bunch of really good guides are going to meet you, and then they're going to take you on a trip of a lifetime that will absolutely give you an authentic African and conservation experience. So the first place you're going to visit is one of our lodges. It's called Ngaga Lodge. And Ngaga Lodge is right in the heart of the Marantesi Forest. It's right where Mike Fay did his mega transect through there. And it's the home range of several groups of habituated gorillas. And so when you get there, you're going to spend some time with our trackers who are going to give you an idea of what to do and what to expect and the behaviors to expect to see, while the next 2 days you're then going to spend trekking and actually going out and seeing these gorillas. And what's really cool about this is these gorillas are in their habitat. You're going to be there visiting them in their habitat. It's not a semi-captive population like the mountain gorillas. It's an actual gorillas that can just leave. So they tolerate your presence. Instead of making you part of their group, they allow you to observe them while they do what they do. And it's very similar to the experience that I had up on Lope many, many years ago. And what's cool about this is we also ask that our guests respect the IUCN guidelines for best graded tourism practices. And that means wearing a mask and keeping a distance. And in the days of this COVID virus epidemic, we just want to make sure, and we're very proud to be able to make sure that we're not bringing any new diseases or things that could injure or harm the gorillas. But, you know, don't come to Congo just to see the gorillas. You're going to come to Congo to experience the rainforest and what really captivated me when I first experienced the rainforest. And so there's lots of other primates. We can take you on trails. Our guides will take you out looking for primates, and we can even take you on night walks where you're going to see the nocturnal animals. You're going to spend 2 days at this camp and see a wide variety of wildlife before you're going to move to your next camp. But as you move to the next camp, which is about 50 kilometers away, you're going to go into the national park and you're going to pass the Sanza Mobimba Community Center, which is where Mrs. Plattner, who's the owner of the lodges and creating this opportunity to do conservation commerce, she also does early childhood development there. And if you're lucky, when the school is in session, you get to stop and actually have smiling contests with a lot of the kids from the community there. And so this is where the kids actually, it's a preschool, and this gives them a leg up, and they actually have an incredible time there. And it's an incredibly well appreciated community project that we're participating in northern Congo as well. But we're going to take you to a river where you're going to get in a kayak, and then you're going to kayak to your next lodge. And this is really a nice experience. If you don't feel like kayaking yourself, you can go in a 2-person kayak and our guide will happily take you. But this is another really fabulous way to experience the wildlife in Congo. And here you can see some people looking at the elephants and some elephants looking back at the people. And that's going to take you to Longo Lodge, which is the second lodge where you're going to stay. And what's cool about Longo Lodge is it's on the edge of this bay, and it's a clearing in the forest where the animals come out and actually get the mineral salts that are found in the water. And so while you can do that, just sit there all day if you want, the real activities are walking and actually getting out there and exploring. And this one image right here that I'm circling gives you an idea that if you really get out there, you get wet, you have a great time. Down here, this is an archaeological site back here near the lodge. And what's really cool about this is when you're out there exploring, you're literally walking in the footsteps of the last great explorers, you know, Stanley, Livingstone, de Brazza. And right here where this archaeological site, Jacques de Brazza wrote about this in his journals in 1895. And these journals are in the Museum of Natural History in Paris. And so you are literally walking in the footsteps of these great explorers, experiencing this rainforest the same way they did. It's pristine, it's untouched, it's well protected, it's well managed. If you put the time in, you're going to see wild animals. You're going to see these things that you've never seen before. It's absolutely amazing. Bird life, mammal life, small life, reptiles. If you're a photographer, bring your macro lens, because you're going to have a chance to see many different images, and it's incredible. But if you put the time in, you're going to have an opportunity to see some fabulous wildlife. You've got bongo, which is the second largest antelope. If you're lucky, you can see those. Forest elephants, forest buffalo, big, large, tiny, small. And it's not just the mammals that like to come to this by. You know, a lot of you know African gray parrots as these solitary birds that you keep in cages. Well, actually, these parrots, they also enjoy the mineral salts, and they come down in large numbers. And it's an incredible opportunity to see them in their natural habitat. It's a phenomenal opportunity. And it's not just the parrots. We've got flocks of up to 5,000 African green pigeons that come down. And what's amazing is when they're all sitting on the ground and a predatory bird flies over, they all take off, and you just hear this absolutely thunderous wing beating. It's an amazing experience. So you're going to spend 2 days there exploring this fabulous area before moving to your next camp, which is in an interesting part of the rainforest. It's Mboko Camp. And what's interesting is that, you know, many people think that the rainforest is homogeneous, when in fact it's actually made up of many different types of ecosystems, including old relic savannas. And so during the last ice age, when the planet was much cooler and much drier, the rainforests were shrinking and the savannas were expanding. But for the last 10,000 years, it's been much warmer and much moister, and the rainforest is taking over the savannas. And there's one small savanna patch in the middle of Odzala, and this is where this camp is. And it's an opportunity to see a mixture of some of the relic populations of savanna wildlife, like the spotted hyena, but also that you get to see some of the savanna birds mixed in with some of the rainforest birds. So it's an absolutely incredible experience to spend 2 nights there as well. And what's really great about this is also you get these great walks, but it's where the river is. And so you can go explore the park by going deep into its heart, up the river, and then drifting down slowly and seeing lots of wildlife on the riverside. You can stop and get out and hike. Some of our guests recently have seen chimps in the trees. It's just another amazing opportunity to see wonderful wildlife of Odzala National Park in northern Congo. And then after you've explored the third lodge in Mboko, then you can really have an opportunity to go up to northern Congo, and actually we're going to fly you to Cabo, and then you're going to go up the river to Sangha Lodge. And Chris mentioned Rod's talk the other night. Well, Rod actually works in Sangha Lodge, and it's just recently been built. It's rebuilt. It's in the Republic of Central African Republic. It's absolutely phenomenal. And there's Rod and his wife, and they're managing this lodge. But what's really fabulous about this is it's very near the iconic bai called Zonga Bai. And what's special about Zonga Bai is the number of forest elephants that come there to get the mineral salts. Now, forest elephants have a very different social structure than the savanna elephants that most people are familiar with. Savanna elephants move around in these large herds, whereas forest elephants, the group size is basically its matriarch and her offspring. The males are mostly solitary. And so when you see a group of elephants, this would be a normal group size. So there's 5 animals. And when you get Zonga Bai is incredible, because when you're there, you're going to spend about 8 hours there. And I've never seen less than 50 animals, and quite often I've seen more than 100 there at a single time. But if you spend 8 hours there, you're going to see probably hundreds of animals coming and going. So it's a real social gathering. It's an amazing experience. It's on par with anything you're going to see. It's probably better than any African elephant experience you're going to see anywhere else. But this bai also is a great place to see bongo, forest buffalo. I've seen giant forest hogs. I've seen mixed groups of mangabes and colobus. It's an incredible experience, but it's not just the bai that's cool. What's really cool about Sangha Lodge is the experience that you get to have with the Ba'aka. And the Ba'aka are these semi-nomadic forest dwellers who still live their traditional methods, and you can go out and visit the rainforest with them. They might take you hunting. They might take you to gather medicinal plants. But what's really cool about Sangolaj and Rod Cassidy and his family is they run a pangolin rehabilitation project. So when pangolins get confiscated from the bushmeat trade, they will rehabilitate them and then re-release them into the wild. And what's really cool about this is that instead of putting radio collars or some other tracking on these pangolins, they actually just get these Ba'aka people to follow them during the day. So pangolins don't move particularly fast and they're fairly easy to follow. And so they know where these pangolins are. So if you visit the lodge, you can actually visit and see a pangolin in the wild. And it's an amazing experience. So once you've had an opportunity to spend a few days up at Songa Lodge, maybe 4 or 5, you'll have really experienced the rainforest everywhere. You're going to go back to Odzala. You will have had the opportunity to really enjoy just the most magnificent rainforest in the planet and to enjoy many of the things that have brought me such joy in my life and to be part of this conservation project around the world. So I just want to say thank you very much, and I'm open to questions. And I guess that's over to you, Chris.
Okay. So in closure, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say that all this and what Paul also spoke about in terms of Odzala, most of our work, a large portion of our funding comes from the Sabina Platinum Africa charities. And in fact, that Sabina Platinum in person carries all the expenses for all the losses and everything that is happening at the moment. She carries us through these times. So I would like to acknowledge Sabina Platinum and the Sabina Platinum Africa charities for what she's done for the LTA. She's our chair, and also for what she's still doing in these times. So give her a round of applause. Thank you very much. Okay, everybody, we listened to Michele on Friday night, and we will up it to 500 people, and we hope this is going to grow and it's going to become a permanent feature. And lastly, if you would like to do a talk and you have something significant to share with us, please let us know on our email address and we will link you. I see Kimi Raiden is already putting up her hand. Or you want to ask a question, Kimi? She's just putting up her hand. Oh, okay. All right. Well, you have got to do a talk now. You raised your hand, I think. All right. So everybody, thanks for a lovely evening. Enjoy the rest of your evening. Relax. Lovely to meet you. Lovely to meet you all.
Everybody.
Enjoy. Thank you and good night.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate it. Thanks for hearing me out.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
Good job, Dad.
Thanks, Paul.
Say that loud. I'm going to go out now. Thanks, Neil Schoof.
Thank you, Paul.
You see, Paul, there's a lot of people actually don't want to switch off. They just want to still stay with you for the evening. Great guy. And Maret, our technician, thank you very much. There she is. Thank you.
Red, me and the children miss you.
We are learning as we're going. Thanks to everybody.
I'm missing alarm. I can't come home now. Sorry.
Okay, guys, I'm going to end the meeting now. Thank you and good night.
Good night.
Good night.